I'm Avidar. I'm heading the Center for Transport and Logistics, IIMA Ahmedabad. And on behalf of the Center, IIMA, we welcome you all to the second session of the workshop, Electric Vehicles. This is a continuation event from the first session, held on 15th. So the first session was basically on the broad nuts and bolts of the industry. Different types of batteries, different types of vehicles, domain stakeholders, understanding of grid protocol, softwares, and broadly consisting of everything on electric vehicles. This session is more in terms of application, more in terms of understanding EV economics, EV policies, and also understanding from the lens of an investor, a customer, a regulator about how the whole industry is on that. We have two great speakers with us, industry veterans, Dr. Arvind Kumar and Vignesh Nath Kumar. I hand over to Vignesh.
Thank you, Avi, and good evening to all of you. Really appreciate that you're taking time off to engage with us and also get to know further about a very exciting change that I think we are all going to see in our lifetimes, right? Maybe a once in a century transition, almost the way those of us who are really bullish on this transition speak about. As Avi mentioned, this is a two-part series. The first part was largely going into the the nuts and bolts of the vehicle and understanding what does this mean at a fundamental level, right? Why is this different? Today we will cover a slightly more macro view of the situation and try to understand what is driving some of these changes from an adoption perspective, and what are the challenges that we face. The purpose is at the end of this session, we are while Avi has been kind enough to call us experts and veterans, we are, I believe, at the very start of a long learning curve, and the purpose is not to leave you with a very comprehensive and deep view. The purpose is to leave you with answers for some of the basic things and hopefully create more curiosity amongst all the people attending this session, so that more people will be interested and more people will join into this revolution. And in that is where we believe we would have achieved the objectives of this session. Right? So please feel free to ask questions in terms of the format itself. This was actually a much longer session that we have compressed into two sessions. I know that what we have scheduled for is longer than what we would normally be used to sitting at a stretch for. But don't worry, A, you can hear this at your leisure. It is being recorded. B, we will be taking breaks in between, both to take questions as well as a pause after we have covered about halfway through what is being planned for today. Okay. And lastly, because it is a compressed session, we will be going slightly faster. And if at all, there are things that you would like me to get into a bit detail, please message on the chat window. We'll see what we can cover online. If not, we'll cover offline, right? So with that basic housekeeping, I'd like to get started. Maybe we'll start with a quick recap by Dr. Arvind of what was covered in the last session, maybe about a minute or so, and then we'll jump into today's agenda, right, where we will look at the outlook for EVs, what are the use cases, what are the challenges in adapting EVs, and challenges looking from multiple perspectives, from the perspective of a user, of a service provider who's very vital to the ecosystem, from the service provider of a financier, right? We'll also get into a bit of depth on the policy aspect, because believe it or not, policy affects our lives very deeply, right? And as an engineer, I never appreciated it enough, I feel, till we got to a stage where it affects your business and your day-to-day angles. So as a philosophy and as a principle, any technology, we try to cover a degree of policy impact on it. So that's what we're going to cover today, and then we'll jump into some of the unit economics as well. So before we start, Arvind, maybe you could do a quick recap of the last week's session.
Certainly. All right, I see my video is off. So last week, what we did, first we looked at try to just understand basic terms. So if we understood, we keep talking about ICE. So when we say ICE vehicle, it's internal combustion engine. So get comfortable with terms like ICE vehicle. When we are saying ICE, we mean a petrol or diesel vehicle. And then what different type of EVs are. Then we looked at powertrain of EVs and try to understand what are the pieces, how an EV look like, and how is it different from an ICE vehicle. We dug deeper. We looked at batteries. We tried to understand what is a battery look like, and how do you make. And after that, we talked about the different form factors and how do they play a role. We learned a little bit about lithium ion. Then we talked about BMS, battery management system, and then different stakeholders, the DISCOM's role, and then the charge point manager's role. So all that was related to infrastructure and the hardware part of it, I would say. Now we are switching gears and talking more about policies and penetrations, and that's where Vignesh will be helping us today. Thanks.
Thank you, Arvind. So when we start, Arvind mentioned lithium ion. I would like to know how many of you have thought about this question. What is the largest source of lithium in India? I'll give 30 seconds for those who want to answer in the chat. So I see a lot of people referring to Karnataka and perhaps prompted by two things. One is the newspaper article on discovery of some lithium, and maybe more so because of Tesla setting up in Bangalore. But there have been a couple of people who I think have sort of touched upon it. Yes, it is used lithium-ion batteries largely from your cell phones. Given India's cell phone penetration, that is way larger than I'm not even the imports that we see in raw lithium form, right? If I can identify some people, right? Siddhartha is also one of the people who's, if he's the same person I have in mind, also one of the people who spent a lot of time in this field. So, at the very basic level, what is causing, at the start of this session, I mentioned that we are going to see a transition perhaps once in a century or once in a lifetime. And we need to understand why. Why is this? Is this over marketing? Is this just hype? Is it reality? And what is causing this reality, right? And like all transitions, it's not just one thing. Because most major transitions happen because of a variety of factors coming together. And it's no different in this case as well. In the case of EVs, there's both a need and a propelling force, right? In terms of the propelling force, it is a question of how much does it cost to extract and use fossil fuels for our as a primary source of mobility and transportation, right? As most people know, as a country we import a large percentage of our oil, And more importantly, even if you keep the tax discussion aside for a minute, and the fact that petrol is at 100 rupees a liter in many parts of the country, um, today we are not accounting for the cost of letting carbon out into the environment. And if you added that in some form, you are going to see an increasing price of using fossil fuels as a major source of transportation fuel. We talked about price of letting carbon out into the environment, and that directly correlates to pollution, which correlates to health, which correlates to a significant healthcare cost. And it is now we've only now that we started quantifying how big it can be, and the numbers are fairly staggering, right? The third piece is the fact that the technology is reaching a point where it is going to be lower cost than IC, right? When we put it in the slide, because it's public document, we are saying 5 to 10 years, but you can see we are hot off a press release that has come last week or 2 weeks ago about the FAME subsidy, right? And you can see that in terms of the pricing, both from a market standard and industry perspective, as well as a policy perspective, it is going to achieve a total cost of ownership that is in parity with two-wheeler petrol vehicles. And that is a huge achievement, right? Because the petrol vehicles took 70-80 years to get to where they are in terms of both efficiencies of production, efficiencies of fuel, and a big ecosystem that exists to support them. And we are saying that within 5 years or 8 years of EVs being a real thing, they are already snapping at the heels of petrol vehicles on being cost parity, right? So and we are we are still at the beginning of the whole adoption curve. We are not even talking about where we are with 20% of the market being electric. So we do believe that the cost curve is going to come down significantly. Lastly, there's a matter of convenience, and the convenience relates to the fact that the pipe that will bring the energy for your transportation and mobility already exists in every single household that most people will use these vehicles from. It exists in every building. It exists in every parking lot. So, in that sense, you have suddenly decentralized the distribution of energy, and made it accessible and therefore more convenient for a lot of people. Now that said, there are challenges in that the grid has to adapt to, but the fact of the matter remains that we do have a significant distribution network already in place. And everybody feels that EVs are like the new in thing, right? But if you think about it, and people say it's going to take a long time, it's not easy, there's so many factors that have to come into play. But look at where things were at the start of the last century, right? In 1900, this is a stock photograph, a very famous stock photograph of New York's Fifth Avenue, right? And you look around and say, where is the car in this, right? Maybe I don't know, can you all spot where the car is? Anybody, any takers on the chat? Right? And you see this one car, right? So in nondescript. Majority is all horse-driven carriages, and that was fashion, right? So and within 1930, in a short span of less than 15 years, less than 2 decades, right? Can you see how the same street looks? And can you spot where is the horse, right? Again, nondescript, right? Suddenly you have seen the economies of scale, the economies of convenience, the fact that it was much more power, it was more accessible, completely changed the whole thing, right? So it is not a doubt anymore that the electric revolution is going to come. The only question is how soon, right? And as with all technologies, the how soon follows what is called an S curve. And you might have heard of this from multiple people and with multiple terminologies, but this just looks like an S, and it's easier to call it an S curve. And in that sense, there you have about 1% of the people who adopt it simply because they want to be the early leaders adopting this and influence how this how the whole adoption rate goes. And in that sense, once you start hitting somewhere around the 5 to 8% mark, is when you realize that this is going to be a real thing, right? There's no going back from here. But that alone is not sufficient. It still takes a fair amount of time and effort for the rest of the market to pick up. And here, what you see is today you have countries like China and Iceland and Sweden already in that 5% range, right? I think this is slightly old data. I'm sure this scorching rate at which China is adding EVs, it's going to overtake Europe fairly soon. And then you also have countries like Norway, which have given significant policy push and significant support for EVs, and they are way ahead of the pack. They are somewhere in the 35% range, right? And what you need to see is the whole adoption starting to touch this 10%, right? And the 10% to 90% journey is very, very rapid in most technologies, right? Um, and if you want to know more, we recommend a really good talk by Tony Seba. Here is the link. You can look him up. And it goes into a lot of interesting details on how this rate of adoption comes about and what to expect as far as EVs is concerned, right? Um, India too has not been lagging behind, to the credit of the market and the government. In fact, India has been seeing EV related startups for almost 4 to 5 years now. When it started, it was definitely more like a science project, very low adoption. And for those of you who might know and remember, there was this company out of Bangalore called Reva, which was one of the first electric car manufacturers in the country, right? A small, you would call it bigger than a golf cart and smaller than a regular Indica, right? And from there to where we are today, with a plethora of options, with so much focus on the two-wheeler and an explosion of options on the two-wheeler, with a number of people announcing that they're going to get into electric, and a large part of last mile delivery, thanks to your e-commerce businesses moving to electric. The adoption rates are accelerating significantly, right? And so is the availability of different form factors. Um, Again, this is definitely not the last you're going to hear, not the complete list of all the form factor options, but these are some of the more recognizable names, right, in this whole market today. And you can see that even as late as December of last year, the sales trends, particularly in passenger and cargo, have been significantly high. They're going up even with a pandemic. You are seeing more people adopt this. You are seeing a lot of the e-commerce delivery folks adopt three-wheeler cargo, and it's become now so commonplace that if you go to a regular large supply chain or transport logistics firm, the differentiator of EV is now moving into how dense is the charging network, what is the vehicle you're using, and getting into more depth there rather than saying at a very base level question of are you going to do EV or not, right? Now, the latest numbers for this, I think, got published just about a week ago. And even year to date, 2021 is looking to be a fairly promising year in an otherwise dull, auto sector in India. So all of this sounds nice, but what does this actually, mean? And what are the challenges, right? That what are the challenges that come about. So in that sense, um, there some of these are intuitive, the challenges that you will see. Some of these, while intuitive, actually involve 1-2 layers more that it will be helpful for you to understand. First and foremost, people say that EVs are expensive, right? More expensive than your regular petrol vehicles. You have to put more money down. You don't know what the buyback price is. We don't have historical data to model the resale price, and the OEMs are also not giving full set of warranties or comfort that you would get from a regular petrol OEM. And all of these are very, very valid concerns, which is why the people who are using and adopting EVs are those who are either saying that I have a way to monetize the vehicle much more aggressively. So I'm less worried about the upfront cost. I'm more worried about the running cost, which is quite high for petrol vehicles. Or, I can live with the risk of the OEM giving only limited warranty or insurance coverage, because the utility of this vehicle for me is much higher than that risk, right? Even with that notwithstanding, even with the early stage high upfront cost and financing issues notwithstanding, there are some very practical issues around the adoption of EVs. The first one being that charging infrastructure across the cities is still weak. You can't just expect that if you have another 3 lakh or 4 lakh electric vehicles on the road, that the same grid can serve for the larger population, right? Now, the grid is going to take some time. There are certain players already in the country, like BSCS. I think most discoms, but some of them are ahead of the rest, have an EV charging policy. They have thought through where they'll put their charging stations, but it has not yet reached the volume and scale and sophistication as yet, right? Therefore, your average consumer is feeling a bit short-changed, saying, what happens if I don't have a connection to a power charging spot, and then how do I get back, how do I travel on, all very valid questions. Related to this question is a question of range anxiety, which is to say how far will this vehicle travel on a single charge. Now, that is largely a challenge for the long distance guys as well, because within the city today, as the vehicles are evolving, range will be less and less of a worry for 99% of the use cases, right? If on a single charge, a two-wheeler can drive up to 100, 120 kilometers, which I think is easily doable. They're not going to spend that much time more than that on the road, however heavy your two-wheeler usage is. However, if you don't want to take your two-wheeler to go from Mumbai to Pune, for example, or Bangalore to Tumkur or Mysore, or Chennai to Pondicherry, or Delhi to maybe Faridabad, or slightly longer, right? You will start to hit that curb, right? Of saying, will I be able to stop and charge, and will I be able to charge fast enough, right? So that a combination of those two will allow me to address the range with which I can cover an electric vehicle, right? The other piece is that the models themselves are evolving, right? So not all models have the best possible vehicle. They do have the best available vehicle, right? But in parallel, there is a number of initiatives going on to make sure that the best available vehicle is made available to the market, right? And it's an evolving market. Because the scale is small and things are going to take some more time to pick up in large numbers. Therefore, most of the maintenance providers are feeling that, should I really invest in an EV touch point when, I can actually make better money by saving it up and building another regular sort of service center, right? So availability of maintenance and repair network is a true challenge, right, in the adoption of EVs. But that said, each of these has a way to work through it, and we have the country best known for its jugaad, as well as others have found ways to work around this, right? And now, a quick question for those who are on chat. What percentage of the total two-wheeler, three-wheeler market do you think three-wheelers constitute, right? The electric three-wheeler, electric vehicles constitute. So again, I'll give 30 seconds. And the other question I have is what percentage of all vehicles sold in India do your two-wheelers and three-wheelers constitute? Lot of numbers being thrown here, but I think most people, perhaps you also saw the numbers here, have got on latched on to the numbers in terms of the total on two-wheelers. So India actually has only 22 to 25 cars for every 1,000 people, and if you compare this to US, US has 950 cars per 1,000 people, right? Um, and whereas in India, the two-wheelers and three-wheelers constitute 84% of all auto sales in the country, right? In terms of numbers, right? Now that said, the quantum from a total price perspective, they're probably not so vastly different. It's not a 5:1 or a 6:1 ratio, but definitely in terms of sheer number of vehicles, a large part is um, coming from two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And in terms of the percentage of those that are there as electric vehicles, actually, even if you counted all the e-rickshaws and so on, now this may vary, but I'll give a range that uh, it's not going to cross 5 to 7% of the entire market. So you can see what a massive, massive substitution opportunity this represents, right? And if you see in terms of uh, you know, uh, also the energy aspect of it is a massive opportunity for an energy transition in our country, right? So what are some of the Indian aspect context specific to India on the EV adoption, right? First and foremost, most people's the average person's use of transportation is primarily to two and three wheeler and some kind of public transportation, which has now changed to some kind of shared mobility solutions like Bounce and Mogo and Rapido and so on, right? The second challenge is that on average in a typical Indian city, a person has a very low chance of traveling very long distances, right? So if you see what's your average trip length, right? You'd see that not more people, not too many people are actually going beyond the 5 to 7 kilometer range, right? And that in itself tells you that in order for the electric vehicle to make sense at a commercial use case and a personal use case level, they should either be saying that they are okay with they're okay with this range that they're able to get because they really don't travel much beyond that, or that they have access to other charging infrastructure, which is now fairly common. Most people take their vehicles and particularly going to work and back, they plug it into their respective workplaces, right? Um, the other angle, which is a sort of cultural angle, and just one second, guys. I'm getting an urgent call which I need to take. I really apologize. Please hold on.
Avi, what I will do is I can continue on behalf of Vignesh. So let me just share my screen.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So the next point which Vignesh was making is the cost conscious. As a culture, of course, we want the best price and we also want the best quality, right? So we want the best quality at the right price. That has to be important in India. Hey, Vignesh, you're back. Okay, all right. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It's just something emergency that I had to take the call.
Stop sharing then. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you? Do I need to just share again?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second piece is, as Arvind was saying, cost consciousness. If we can get BMW at the cost of Indica, we'll take it, right? But that said, I do have to say that customer preferences in India have started to become more clear, which is why you see so many OEMs releasing new vehicles every year. However, to keep it real, our purchasing power is still way lower compared to many other countries, right? So I think the cost consciousness piece of it is not going to go away in a hurry, but there is a space for premium vehicles. That's something that we are seeing. A more technical and a geographic reality that we all live with is that we live in a tropical climate, which means that the weather in most part of the country tends to be hotter and either much more humid or much more dry compared to the most ideal sort of conditions that would work for a battery or an EV based solution. And therefore, that affects the ability of the vehicle to perform at the peak. Secondly, it also means that the inconvenience of even a one-off breakdown or a one-off being caught in the middle of the road with no charge and things like that is far more in our country than it is in other places, right? There is a space limitation. Two-wheelers, the massive adoption of two-wheelers and the scooter type or the tuk-tuk type form factor is very unique to India and a few Southeast Asian countries. And therefore, in terms of the EV revolution, if you look at it from a vehicle standpoint, both the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler doesn't leave a lot of space for the battery, right? Which means that there is an automatic limitation on being able to put a very high-range vehicle on a high-range EV vehicle. Battery technologies will keep improving, but end of the day, the volumetric restrictions remain in the EVs in this form factor. Another thing that we are very used to is ruggedness, right? In fact, we pride ourselves in the way we have rugged vehicles compared to many other countries. What does ruggedness mean is, the other way to put it is rougher usage, overloading the vehicles, the grid itself having significant power fluctuations, There's a lot of potholes in the road, therefore the vehicle performance and therefore what it has to optimize for in terms of speed and in terms of shock absorption, etc., is much higher compared to your average use case. So what does all of this mean? It just means that in in the long run and in reality, a product that is, or a group of products that is most apt for India, cannot simply be a copy paste solution from the West, right? And it cannot simply be that I have taken something from China, I have assembled here, and it is going to work. There is definitely a degree of adaptation to Indian conditions that has to be done, and be at a more subtle level and a deeper level, we do need to see a lot of innovation to meet our unique needs, right? However, that said, India is a large market by itself. That's why most people are rushing to say, let's make sure we have planted our flag on the EV space. And whatever can be made to work in India, you could derate it a lot more and make it work in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America, right? So, therefore, make in India for the world, make in India for creating cutting edge projects that can serve and be sold across the world is a very viable concept and theme as far as EVs is concerned. And as you know, there is a significant number of support for this across the world, across the country. So you see some names here. Just switching gears into the policy angle, it's not only for adoption, but it's also for manufacturing, right? And the announcement that was made a week ago about FAME2 subsidies and PLI linked schemes. PLI means production linked incentives for manufacturing high-end and advanced cell chemistry batteries, etc., is definitely a step in the right direction. For those of you who were familiar with what happened with solar, India is such a large market for solar panels and solar energy. At the same time, none of the world's largest companies yet operate in India from end to end. By end to end, I mean right from having the core polysilicon technology manufacturing to the module manufacturing, right? There's no end-to-end manufacturing setup of very high caliber and with a lot of investment yet set up in India. And we have had solar for the last 10 years. So I think the government has done well to take a leaf out of that book to learn, and has started putting in place incentives for attracting high-end technologies to be manufactured in India, right? And if you see FAME2, and there is a further announcement of a FAME2 scheme, basically incentives are being linked to the size of the battery and the level of advancement of the technology. It is no longer just a check the box exercise saying, if it is lithium, if you have put a battery inside, then that's it, right? I'm going to give you this much. And most people will ask the question, what, is this sufficient? There's so much incentive, but is this sufficient? Is this going to raise the bar for EVs to be adopted? And I can tell you that the sort of interest levels that you're seeing in the market today post this announcement, where even the government announced a 15,000 rupees equivalent for a scooter, for a 3 kilowatt scooter. That price is now being, you have very good operating scooters being offered between 1.15 to 1.25 lakhs. And you might say, what, it's still more expensive than my Honda Activa or my TVS Jupiter or Hero or any of those alternatives that I have. But you have to bear in mind that the operating costs of these vehicles is going to be so much lower that, you are going to see paybacks in less than 2 years, right, of the delta cost. And the ICE variant prices are also going up. They are not getting any cheaper, right? So you do have a Honda Activa, depending on the model, And I use Honda Activa simply because it is a staple consideration for most two-wheeler buyers in this country. Um, they they retail anywhere between 90 to 95,000, and you're saying, what, for 30,000 I am going to be able to recover that delta in less than 2 years, right? So that in itself is a significant advantage. And like I said, EV is already nipping at the heels of ICE, whereas EV is still not a completely matured technology. There's a lot more that can be done, and the level of scale of adoption is still minuscule compared to petrol vehicles. And in terms of support, again, for the entrepreneurs in this audience and for those who are working in large corporates where they can influence decisions, the government has come up with a very phased approach. And what they are saying is that um, we are not looking for overnight everything is going to change, but at the same time we do want to support a very consistent effort towards electric vehicle technology and manufacturing self-sufficiency in the country, right? Because if indeed India is going to be one of the largest markets, then we want to make sure that a large part of the tech manufacturing can happen in India. The advantage of making that happen is that your ability to create and release next generation products is that much higher, and you have people who can bring in advanced technologies relevant for the Indian context. So I'm going to pause a little bit here, let you read the slide, um, and address if there are any questions to be addressed. I see the answers for the previous questions. Um, in terms of relevant materials, at the end of this presentation, we do have a curated set of links that we have read through many pages and felt that these are some of the good places to read through. So please do go through that. You can see that there are many incentives here. So I'm just going to let you just absorb it.
Vignesh, in case you're talking, you're on mute. Vignesh, you're on mute.
Hello. Hey, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I think I went on mute and I was talking. So, in terms of transportation policy, there is definitely also both a historical feature as well as things that the government is bringing new for this sector. Now, the historical feature is, India always had this rickshaw. You see a lot of e-rickshaws going around. They basically have replaced your manual rickshaw. Of course, where there was no manual rickshaw, you don't see that many e-rickshaws, but you do see, those places have the, also have an equivalent of the Luna, right? Where speeds are less than 25 kilometers per hour. the power the power needed by the vehicle is not a lot more, and therefore those have traditionally been under the ambit of, you don't need a registration and a license to drive, right? But that said, in my view, e-rickshaws, the slow speed two-wheelers are all a Indian jugaad response to a very poor transportation infrastructure that used to exist, right? Today, whether we see it or perceive it or not, roads and connectivity are a lot better, right, than they used to be 30 years ago. And that's simply because of the amount of infrastructure investment that has gone in the last 30 years, whether it is highways, whether it is cities. I mean, I live in Bangalore, so I can always forever be grumpy about how much the roads are always dug up. But on a qualitative and quantitative level, the city has way better roads today than it had 30 years ago, and that's just the reality of it. And the RTO processes and everything has become a lot more digital. So even now, to sort of register a vehicle is far less cumbersome, and the government has made it easier with this whole green license plate, right? And also the fact that if you are a regular driver and you want to use your EV for commercial usage, you don't need a commercial license. All of this are meant to sort of help adopt more EVs, right? And the what is called homologation. This is a term that you will see thrown about by many OEMs and people who are in the EV sector. Don't get psyched. It is basically the approvals required for a vehicle to be deemed as roadworthy in India, right? Whether it is safety, performance, what checking that what is being marketed is similar, is very close to what reality is, etc., right? And the Ministry of Road Transport has allowed the registration of vehicles without pre-fitted batteries, right? As long as the prototype has been verified by the department. Now, this is not yet caught on as widely as one would expect, simply because the financing terms and the risk allocations are still not clear. But this is one of the, in my mind, the largest opportunities for a country like India, right? Where you can say that I can change the battery, I can lease the battery, but I will register a vehicle without the battery. Therefore, my upfront cost goes lower. And why is that important? Because basically your battery is carrying a fully loaded petrol tank with you all the time, and it costs much much less to load up this tank compared to a regular petrol. So you are having to pay some upfront costs. So if there are financing structures that can make it cheaper, then why not? Lot of states. So a few slides ago, we saw a plethora of ministries and programs involved. That is the reality of India. But in terms of states as well, a lot of states are trying to take the leap here. As you know, transportation is a concurrent subject, but it's not just one central ministry that can dictate everything. It's also a large source of revenue for the states. So a lot of states have started applying or presenting very progressive policies, right? So overall, the other very significant leverage that the government agencies have in the adoption of EV is the price of electricity that is needed for charging these vehicles. Again, this is a different department compared to your EV Ministry of Road Transport that does the registration, and Ministry of Heavy Industry and that does the approvals for the subsidies for production. So again, you see a concerted effort across the country to bring very affordable electricity prices, right? Now, the very question of all of this is this sustainable, right? Can the electricity prices run like this? Is that giving an unfair or undue advantage today that tomorrow it will not be there, etc.? And those are fair questions. There are many people who are digging into the question of petrol subsidies vis-a-vis electricity subsidies for and the implications of large-scale adoption of EV for the country. But that said, you can look up, we'll share some links. There's a very interesting research done by a group out of Pune called Prayas on this very topic. And what you can see is that even if you took away all the subsidies and you made it equivalent in the sense that from a state perspective, for the level of usage of EVs, the revenues from taxes on petrol and revenues on taxes from electricity remain the same. So the government, whether it is at the state or the central government, is more or less agnostic to which vehicle is running on the roads. Then you are talking about electricity prices, in the range of about 11 to 12 rupees per kilowatt hour. Now, that is a sticker shock today, but as efficiencies improve and as more and more renewable gets onto the grid with at cheaper and cheaper prices, it can come down to as low as 8 rupees and still make the government good money. And at that point, it's a complete no-brainer that at a mass level you would start adopting electric vehicles. Now there are other challenges on that, which is who will put up the charging infrastructure, who pays for it, how do you subsidize it, what about even the cost of lithium batteries and the fact that you're importing most of it. It is limited. Are we going to have enough to meet the demands of the vehicle? The answer to all of that lies on the second part, lies in scientific progress. Yes, lithium is limited. Yes, things are going to get heated up, but still for the levels of adoption that we will see to take it up to 25-30% of vehicles being electric, I think there's enough resources in the world, right? And technology continues to evolve every day. There are many technologies that are in commercial testing phase that do not see this level of rarity of elements required. On the other hand, to the first question, um, how does this actually who pays for all of this, right? We do believe, like just like how for the petrol station every franchisee and every company is has a rate model which does make money for them. We believe that a mass adoption and a higher range vehicle availability will automatically make charging infrastructure economically viable. You are seeing this in some isolated cases, but for this to happen at scale, obviously the adoption itself has to happen at scale. And there are that doesn't mean that we have got all of it right. We still continue to keep fine tuning and adapting to the market conditions globally and in India. There is still a lack of clarity on whether there is a charge on the vehicle if the battery if the vehicle is registered without the battery, if it is financed, right? What is the applicability of the policy to battery separated vehicle? What happens? Of course, there is a lot of clarity that has come on the two-wheeler side, but what about three-wheeler side? What happens there? Three-wheelers can be a significant market in India at a midpoint of technology, not too complex as a car, not too simple as a two-wheeler, but there's still looming uncertainty around that. Today most of the sales in India are low speed, low range two-wheelers from a number of vehicles perspective. So a lot of them end up not qualifying for the FAME subsidy and therefore not being able to take advantage of it. And I touched upon this whole EV charging and fossil fuel, right? So I'm going to pause quickly. I'll see what the questions are here. I have addressed some of them while speaking. Regulatory challenges for retrofitting ICE vehicles. Yeah, that's been another sore point. I think there have been a number of retrofitting startups that have tried to come in, still very hazy. I think there have been startups that have managed to get approvals, but it's a policy that keeps getting defined by the by the hour. In fact, many people have moved out from retrofitting as of now. That said, I do believe that retrofitting can be a large opportunity in India if you have the right costs. Today, your challenge is that the retrofitting costs versus a brand new EV costs are loaded in favor of just go get a new EV, right? Um, and e-rickshaws, I'm not, while they are a fantastic jugaad application and great return on money, you can make up the money in less than a year, they can run it for another year, meets a lot of criteria in terms of both cost and cost consciousness and the utilitarian aspect. But that technology is not like cutting edge, and as somebody has sort of pointed out here, they don't handle large loads because they're not designed to do that, right? So I personally see e-rickshaw market, um, you know, will balloon to um, cover where the current rickshaws are there. But slowly, as you get more efficient technology and as the financing picks up, you are going to see a replacement of that market, right? Um, on conversion of electric vehicles or existing vehicle to an electric vehicle, as I mentioned before, the cost economics are still not working out. But I do believe that there are many large majors who are working on retrofitted powertrains that can be very, very economical. And when that comes through, for sure, graphene based, any technology that see, and I'm not getting into very specific because you have the graphene base. You can talk about superconductor base. You can talk about so many things. The point is that lithium is going to be and will always be a limited resource on this planet, right? So while we are still at the early stages of both mining and recycling, it's going to plateau. Maybe not in the next 10 years, and the stranglehold that lithium technology has in the storage space is very high because it is, truth be told, the most advanced commercial technology, the one that is giving comparable and cost effective total cost of ownership, and the charge densities are amongst the highest, right? So no doubt, new technologies I think will continue to come and will replace. Just like nobody thought of a leaded petrol when people started driving cars, right? And you did see a huge transition. So I am a believer that technologies will continue to evolve and disrupt in this space, right? So there are certain other ways that are being incentivized. We are, uh, you are seeing the government invest heavily into the knowledge economy. They do want to attract some of the best and cutting edge EV related companies into the country. There is a lot of support that is available for businesses that are looking to go sustainable. Even without that, it is economically viable. Businesses are going, but there is support available, right? So what we can conclude from a policy perspective and from a market macro perspective is that this is a revolution that there is no going back. The adoption rates will continue to pick up, maybe slightly slowed down due to the impact of COVID, but it is going to pick up. Once the supply chain issues and the demand for mobility keeps going up. And lastly, I think this is a more efficient technology, and therefore it's a no-brainer. It's a DC technology uh, uh, powering the tire and the wheel directly. There's a lot of, you can read up about this as well, but from an energy to the wheel perspective, it is a much more efficient technology and therefore is going to disrupt. So at this point, we are roughly about 45% through what I wanted to cover. And I see we are at about 6 o'clock. So Arvind or Ravi, maybe this is a logical point where we can take a 5-minute break.
Yes, yes. Let's take a 5 minutes. No, 6:10. Let's.
Yeah. And we'll reconvene again at 6:10.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I see there is a few questions. Maybe I'll start with addressing that. Okay. So, in terms of supply chains, distribution, etc., private equity, VC, those who have seen my background, I'm sure you'd love to know it. So I'll come to it at the end of it. But what is, that's just, one of the many aspects, right? What is most interesting is I have been amazed at how many people have come forward to say, let us go build something in electric vehicles, right? When there is so much market risk, when there is uncertainty, where the excitement is so palpable, right? And this we are talking about when, maybe even less than, 1/100% of people are excited about EVs in the country. Imagine if every one of you who's on this call and every such session that we do, starts getting more interested and more involved. It's just it's just like a mushrooming of these things. So from that standpoint, I do believe that the largest opportunities today will still be in fundamentally vehicle design. Can you design vehicles and batteries for Indian conditions? Can you look at what kind of optimizations and what kind of operations can you bring that is customized to EV? And we'll go through some of these things towards the end of the call, right? Okay, so just to start back again. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So, in this last segment, let's cover a few things around what is the financing aspects. What are the challenges from a commercial use case? We talked about the personal use case, but not very different, but there are some additional challenges from a commercial use case. And while we always can see 10 reasons why something is very challenging to do, we'd also like to go through some of the examples of how these are being addressed, right? And get into research opportunities and some of the analytics as well, which we believe can be very key, right? Is everybody able to hear? Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, because there are some messages saying people can't hear. So great. Now this is indicative. Again, this keeps changing as technology improves, as market rates fluctuate depending on demand and supply. But broadly, moti, you have a battery that can be anywhere between 35 to 40% in a smaller vehicle. In a bigger vehicle like a car, you could where the battery sizes are much bigger, you would have almost 45 to 55% range, right? Then you have the drivetrain and the chassis and the system, all of that, right? Now, the interesting trend that we have been observing is that battery prices have accelerated their sharp decline over the last 3 to 4 years. This is largely because of more efficiencies in operation, more efficiencies in scale, the demand for this going up, and innovation that is being driven by a large number of Chinese and American companies today. And with the European OEMs also coming into play, I'm sure that is going to accelerate, right? On the BMS side, we do expect the prices to drop, though in the last 3 months, and this is more current, we have to stay updated as we see this market become bigger. The semiconductor costs in general and the chip costs have all started to go up, right? And that is largely because of a COVID-related disruption, right? But we do think that it will even out, and the price of BMS and all sorts of chips that will go into a vehicle are going to keep coming down, right? So if you look at absolute pricing, the EV, like I said, 1.15 to 1.25 lakhs is more expensive than your Honda Activa. But that's really not how you would want to look at it, right? Because upfront cost is not the only determinant. There is a terminology called total cost of ownership. So if you want to sound very intelligent and smart, you be like me and say TCO, right? But it is basic logic. All that it means is that, when you have a very high upfront cost and you have a much lower operating cost, then what you need to look at is on a 3-year or a 5-year range, what is your cost of ownership of that vehicle? And is this better than the current vehicle that you have? And today, what we are seeing is that for fleets that are covering higher kilometers on a daily basis, so for example, three-wheelers that are covering, say, 85 to 100 kilometers a day, four-wheelers, cars or sedans that cover, let's say, 150 to 160 kilometers a day, two-wheelers that are in the range of 75 to 80, 85 kilometers a day. These are all, mind you, higher ranges for a typical vehicle of that category in India. The total cost of ownership is much lower, and therefore it's more cost effective to use the EVs, right? Of course, there is an angle around availability and making sure that the EVs are charged, but we'll come to that, right? Also, from a wear and tear perspective, as the battery technology matures, as the vehicle itself matures, powertrains mature, they have a higher projected life for commercial use on a first use basis, largely because you don't have a very large number of moving parts in the vehicle, right? And when you don't have a large number of moving parts, your depreciation and the and the sort of wear and tear that leads to lower resale value is much lower, right? Now, that said, today there are many people who assume that the whole vehicle will be fully salvaged in 3 years and there'll be nothing left, or they assume a sort of terminal value of 10 to 15%. And that is largely because you still haven't discovered a second-hand market, you still haven't discovered a second life use case for the battery. The recycling itself is not efficient enough, or the scale is not efficient enough. But as the adoption goes from 5% to 10, 12%, all of those kick in, right? And then you automatically start seeing the resale value. Now, why is resale value important? Because that also impacts the ability to get financing and what people will invest for on a use case basis, right? So if you were to take a two-wheeler example, and again, these are indicative numbers, this keeps changing every so often, and you take make some assumptions, right, which is 10,000 kilometers of usage in a day, on private vehicles, about 30,000 for not in a day, in a year. For commercial vehicles, 5 years of ownership of the vehicle, etc., etc. Right? What you end up seeing, right, is on a two-wheeler basis, the electric scooter can be a significant reduction on the total cost of ownership, right? And if that were the case, and that's why you're seeing so much hype and interest around it. People are going to start adopting, right, very, very quickly, and we do believe that's a great opportunity. Now, at what point does this make sense at a personal use case, right? And what you do see is, as the if the price of the two-wheeler, a good two-wheeler, premium two-wheeler, comes down to anywhere between 1 to 1.1 lakhs, right, with a 3 kilowatt hour battery, compared to an upfront cost of 90,000 for a Honda Activa equivalent, which is sort of where things are. A gap of 20,000 is a no-brainer. Even personal use cases with much lower number of kilometers that people would run will tend to use it, right? And the reason for that is, let's say your delta per kilometer is roughly on an overall basis is roughly about 3 to 4 rupees per kilometer. I'm taking the most conservative assumptions, right? And an average person uses it for let's say 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers in a year. Taking everything in account, it's a 1 year payback, right? At which point people will start to adopt. So at 20,000 to 25,000 rupees of delta, it's a complete no-brainer, even in a personal use case, right? Of course, the quality of the experience, the charging infrastructure, all of those become important in that scenario, right? The inflection point for various technologies, and again, this is based on a report that came out last year by a very well-known investment banking banker called Avendis. Here is a projection of when the likely year of inflection will happen, and as you can see, inflection is already here for two-wheeler fleet, and
Vignesh, can
sorry.
you use the laser pointer? Can you use laser pointer? That may be better.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
So as you can see, right, the inflection point for two-wheeler fleet is already here. But this is a projected trajectory of prices in India, and this is sort of this is between the low intensity and the high intensity battery pack. Um, what we believe is actually the accelerated. This could flatten out a bit because of COVID, but you will start seeing a much sharper decline from 2023, 2024 onwards. Why is that the case? Because I believe the PLI scheme for battery manufacturing, and the other components of the battery, like cathode rays, etc., is very, very good. It's one of the best schemes that I have seen across the world. And as some of the larger industrial groups latch onto it and you start seeing made in India costs, you are going to see that dip further, right? So 2023-24 timeframe going to be extremely exciting, right? And I believe, as much as bankers do feel very proud, I do think this particular report was a very well researched report. This could be beaten as well, right? So, in terms of one other point where we are shifting gears a little bit, it is not just merely the price point of the vehicle that makes the adoption a challenge. It is also the ecosystems, right? So, as far as the petrol vehicle ecosystem is concerned, as you would have seen, it's an ecosystem that has been built over many decades, right? From 1900s through World War I, through World War II, both of which gave a huge boost to the internal combustion engine, to the oil industry. So many subsidies available over decades across various countries. So, obviously, it has set up a very well-known and a robust ecosystem where each part of the ecosystem is no longer worried about the other part. So, in the case of an ICE vehicle, the OEM doesn't care, is there going to be enough fuel or not? The fuel station doesn't care, are there going to be enough vehicles on the road, right? The customer is not worried about, is there going to be a fuel station, or, will there be enough service and, repair shops? So each person only says, let me see what is best for me, and I will go with that, right? Whereas that is not the case as far as the EV ecosystem is concerned. Unfortunately, today, as things stand in the EV ecosystem, your customer has to worry: are there enough fuel stations? Because otherwise, I will not make back the money that I would have made, right? Then the OEMs have to worry, is there enough people ready to finance my vehicle? Because without that, it is not possible to break such a high capex into opex and make people buy, right? So, this kind of feature is a very indicative of the early stage of maturity. Therefore, you find that each of these players are playing multiple roles. You do find OEMs saying, let me put up or let my group company put up charging stations. You do find customers like Amazon and Big Basket are putting up charging stations themselves. You find service providers or fleet operators saying, let me go get financing and tie up with the OEM, or tie up with charging infrastructure. So, this multiple role play will continue for some time. And then subsequently, as the ecosystem matures, you'll find it transitioning to where each person starts optimizing for their corner of this pentagon and not worry too much, right, about what the other person is doing. But till for the next few years, it is going to be multiple role plays, right? Which then brings us to what does it look like? You have seen, this sort of also ties into the opportunities that exist. What can be some of the opportunities for the people on this call and anybody wanting to be more engaged with this ecosystem? You have everything from high-end technology that has to come up in the ancillaries. A tier one supplier here is very, very important. Then you have the OEMs themselves. Every single one of them, if you see,
Vignesh,
has
sorry,
announced.
screen sharing has stopped. So.
Oh, hold on. Why is that? Sorry about that. Just give me a second. Can you see this now?
Yeah.
So if you see every single day or every week, there is some OEM or the other announcing that they're going to get into electric, or electric is going to be the only set of cars they will sell from 2030 onwards, right? Now, let us break this up. Everybody thinks 2030, we are in 2021, so far out. How does it matter? But the automobile industry is, you're trusting your life with this vehicle when you're going out. So and you're trusting a lot of your money with buying a vehicle when you get a vehicle, right? So the automobile industry thinks at least 5 years, 6 years ahead in terms of a product that has to come out, right? So their platform strategies, their procurement strategies, the way they develop their vendors, the way they develop their service partners, there's a lot of thought and effort goes into it years ahead of when the platform actually comes out to play, right? And that is something that we need to appreciate. So when somebody like a Volkswagen or an Audi is saying that 2026, I think today the announcement was, I forget which company, another European major saying 2026 onwards, every car we sell is going to be only an EV, right? In order for them to achieve that goal in 5 years from today, they have to be investing heavily today, right? And that is the ideal opportunity for people to get into jobs in that sector, right? So you do see a lot of these things both in India and globally coming through. You do see, of course, the very vibrant sales and distribution and financing industry starting to pick up EVs. It is still minuscule compared to the opportunity, but you are seeing enough number of people, saying I'm going to finance 2,000 two-wheelers here, 3,000 two-wheelers there, 100 four-wheelers here. So all of that, people are already getting their feet wet, right? And not to mention all the agencies, whether it is agencies like ESL or power companies, or grid companies, charging station companies, all starting to put out their sort of flag on the map, right? So it's a very exciting time to get in.
And again, the laser pointer. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah. So a very exciting time to get in, whether you want to get into high technology here, whether you want to get into the OEM space here, you want to be on the financing and distribution side. Especially today, I'm sure there is many opportunities to be a distributor for the many OEMs that are coming through. And it's not a bad thing in the sense, a distributor becomes the center of all financing, of all charging infrastructure as well. If you're technically oriented distributor, you can actually do a lot more than just sell the vehicle, right? And for sure, in the grid, on the grid side, there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done, right? You see, for example, in places like Bangalore, Delhi, Hyderabad, they're already starting to put building codes that will include electric vehicle charging as a requirement, right? Which means all of those are opportunities that come up. So we'll go into a few models, right? When I said I gave examples of a particular player having to play multiple roles. So, one of the more famous premium two-wheelers is Aether, a company out of Bangalore, has been at it for almost 7-8 years, and sells one of the most recognizable designs today, right? And what you see is they actually are setting up the charging stations or provide a charging infrastructure. They are an OEM. They have tied up and they provide financing on their website. So when you go in, you can lease or you can buy directly, seamless experience. They're not, it's not even like where you have to run behind, 5 different people for this. And they are also underwriting some of the maintenance and service warranties and resale service particularly, right? So the fact is that a pure play OEM like Aether is having to do 2 or 3 other roles, right? Likewise, if you take the low speed vehicle, this is a very recognized vehicle that you can see in most cities in India have this Yulu model. Again, they are actually largely a fleet operator, right? They're a service provider, but they realize that for to be able to provide this low cost, short range mobility service in India, they need to go electric. There was not any good form factor at the right price, so they went ahead and developed their own vehicle. They provide the charging or the swapping stations, and you only pay per kilometer or per hour use of the vehicle. So behind the scenes, they are financing this whole thing themselves, right? So again, here is a service example of a service provider who's doing multiple other roles in the ecosystem, right? So I'm going to take a quick break before and address some questions if there are before we get into saying what are all how big is this market really. Okay, so there's a question about what does it do to impact dealer networks, dealer profitability, and does it change the business model? Short answer, absolutely, right? If you see dealers in general have been, when you take a dealership, your after sales service, parts and sales of spare parts all constitute almost 40-50% of your margins, right? And in this case, it is going to come down. So what you do see is dealers are now getting into saying, can I provide more services? Can I provide charging? Can I provide a better customer experience for the customer? And how do I even be the person who helps with new types of after sales service, right? Battery, for example, or the powertrain, or the ability for the buyer to come and get on demand vehicles, right? So you are going to see some of those things come through, but there's no question that the traditional model is going to be disrupted, and this is not just for dealers. It applies to OEMs as well. If you think about it, OEMs face a very similar question too, right? So there's no question, there's no doubt that this is going to disrupt it, right? Salvage cost of EV is next to zero. Is it going to improve? Well, frankly, it is next to zero only because people don't know how to make use of what is left of the vehicle. You are seeing salvage costs go up. It also depends on how roughly it has been used, right? Okay, so moving on, just 1 second, please. Moving on, now there is a whole angle around shared mobility, right? That can be a big driver for adoption in India. For that, if you just need to look at the numbers, a lot of us are used to taking shared modes of transportation. It's not new for us, unlike many other markets like the American market or Australian market. So in that sense, it's a very large amount of spend for a country like India. And this in itself becomes the opportunity, because in shared modes, the electric vehicle, as you have seen, can be far more viable, right? And more so, if you see that while there is the three-wheeler and two-wheeler angle, the large opportunity is going to be in the larger form factor vehicles as well. And again, that I believe is going to pick up in India fairly soon as the costs continue to come down, right? I'm going to skip that just for want of time. I do want to hand it back to at least for about 10 minutes to Arvind to cover some of the other points. But what you're seeing is in mobility itself, there are other things that are disrupting even for ICE vehicles, right? The fact that there is a gig economy, you are able to order a car, and more people in India are able to get a car when they want on the click of a button on your smartphone. Is amazing. 15 years ago, anybody traveling to India would not have thought this is ever possible, right? So the gig economy is a significant driver of adoption of sustainable transportation, because it is allowing for more efficient asset utilization. The other part that is very, very disruptive for India is the fact that India has much more dense data networks, and data in India is way cheaper than most other places, right? Why is this important? Because the electric vehicle is a connected vehicle from the get-go. Most OEMs have connected their vehicles to the grid, to the network, because they want to keep track of the battery. They want to understand how it is performing on a continuous basis. Also a piece of information that's very important for insurance companies. And of course, any service provider, the more data they can get, how to optimize and charge better, the better they will also be able to extract value. So that is also driving a significant amount of use cases for electric vehicles. So in short, I think just the culture of shared mobility and the gig economy with low tech and data costs in the world is a big driver of sustainable transportation, right? And where are you seeing this? Definitely in all the last mile deliveries, in the shared transportation for employee and customer transport, and in ride hailing, right? Today, um, uh, it is already commercially viable in the levels of utilization that were there pre-COVID. If not for COVID, you would have seen a absolute mushrooming of electric vehicles being used in shared transportation. Unfortunately, like with many other sectors, we are facing the challenges of COVID, but I do believe it's a matter of time, and in fact, more on demand and work from home and flexible work cultures will demand more transportation that is shared, right? Which again makes a great case for electric vehicles as opposed to petrol or ICE vehicles, right? And in terms of a ecosystem in India, there is enough number of opportunities that you are seeing, uh, both from a manufacturing perspective and a use case perspective, um, where vibrancy is increasing. You are seeing more people announcing setting up EV related businesses. But what you're also seeing is more vertical integration. You are seeing the Mahindras and Tatas of the world also get into services on mobility. You see Hyundai is announcing mobility. You see that a manufacturer like Amar Raja, who traditionally for so many decades of their existence have been a battery manufacturer, are saying that we want to get into mobility solutions. We just don't want to be a pure battery manufacturer. So I think the ecosystem in India is evolving very, very rapidly for people to play multiple roles, as a result of which new sorts of employment and job opportunities are coming up. As a comparison, of course, the two-wheeler ecosystem is the most advanced, in terms of the number of players and in terms of how vibrant it is. But the sense is that the four-wheeler and three-wheeler is not too far behind. It will pick up. Tata's and MG have already made an announcement. You do see Hyundai four-wheelers on the road. Obviously, the big splash news, is that Tesla is going to release anytime soon. And you know that a company like Tesla plans so much in advance, right? It doesn't just simply come in and say, I'll start operations tomorrow. So if they are thinking of an entry in 2025, 26 with a large number of models, they start planning 5 years in advance, right? So, this slide was written before the announcement, so that's why you see a question mark against Tesla, but that's now pretty much confirmed, right? They are very much in the market. On freight and bus, somewhat still slow to pick up. You have the incumbent OEMs have announced products. You have startups like EVA, self-propulsion, and a whole bunch of people who are some of them in stealth mode as well, trying to get out freight vehicles. And bus, of course, is a very large segment. You do see government announcing that they're going to procure 8,000 to 10,000 buses. Even a company like NTPC has said that they would be interested. But that is still, in my mind, a 7 to 10 year market. In that sense, it's going to take a little bit longer. But there's enough vibrancy today for people to get in and say, let me come here and become an expert over the next 4 to 5 years. Right? Lastly, what are some of the factors influencing financing? Right? So one, of course, is the fact that like most banks today, they look at what is the creditworthiness of the person taking a loan to buy a vehicle, and what is the use for which the vehicle is being put to use by this person, and accordingly set the interest rates and the term and how much quantum, right? Over and above that, behind the scenes, they are factoring in what is the reliability track record of the vehicle, what is the warranty from the OEM, what is the resale value that they have seen in the market, and second-hand sales platforms like Cars24, Carvale, etc. have helped discover the resale price much more, right, as opposed to a informal economy that used to exist earlier. And in addition to these factors, for commercial EV, the financiers also have to dig into what is the revenue earning potential, right? And this becomes a serious consideration for EV because of range anxiety and the fact that to charge it you'll have to have the vehicle downtime. If it is a slow charging setup, for if you use fast charger, the battery degrades faster. So many of these considerations that you have heard from Arvind last week also are a factor in how much financing you can raise for the vehicle, right? But that said, I think over a period of time, what is getting done is a lot of people have started focusing on establishing a second-hand value, and a large part of the second-hand value is going to come from battery, right? So that is where the split of the battery and the vehicle and create an OPEX out of a CAPEX scenario will go a long way, and establish new financing models for the battery, which then can enhance the adoption of the vehicle even on a second-hand basis. The other angles, which are very specific to India, is the fact that there are import duties, and largely they have been put in place because the government wants to discourage low quality imports, right? In this sector, and promote local manufacturing. The GST is already fairly at a low rate, but there is an inverted track structure, which hopefully in the next budget we will look at it. And the other angle that for a lot of Indian manufacturers is that the export markets are much larger markets today. as compared to the India market, right? However, the vehicle regulations and the safety records, etc., and the fact that you have, they themselves, those markets also have local manufacturing norms, are some of the challenges there. But no doubt, just like in other segments of the automobile manufacturing, India can become a powerhouse in exporting EVs as well. Okay. So overall, just to look at what's happening, new players are being welcomed. Old industrial setups for automobile sales, manufacturing, after sales service revenue, and energy is getting disrupted. You do see even large conglomerates in the oil and gas sector announcing that they will get into EV charging and into the EV segment. The new areas of industrial automation and production are coming in with regard to powertrain, with regard to battery storage, and all of this obviously leads to new business opportunities, right? So I will maybe Arvind, you want to quickly take over on the research and job opportunities. Before that, I'm just looking at a couple of questions. I'm going to not comment about specific thoughts on specific brands. I've kept it most general and sort of agnostic. Some of the names I've shared are the more prominent names, people who have been around. But I have not commented on their performance or whether they are the best or not. So I'm going to refrain from that. However, on other technologies, solar powered EVs, they're definitely being experimented, but it's not clear how much surface area on the car alone will be sufficient. But there are, even as we speak, there are solar powered charging stations that are there. And hydrogen powered, hydrogen, in my view, while there's a lot of people gung-ho about it, one globally, but more specifically for a country like India, it's going to take a while. And miniaturizing hydrogen technologies is a cost in itself, and I think where it will become commercially viable first could be the more energy intensive use cases, right? One is in the industry itself, and as far as transportation is concerned, in the long haul high weightage freight, right? So with that, I think most of the questions have been addressed. I'll hand over to Arvind to go over some of the job and research opportunities, and then we'll circle back.
Thanks, Vignesh. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So what I will do is, I don't want to take a lot of time because I want to leave some time for conversation also. So maximum 6 to 7 minutes, I will cover it. And of course, a lot of this GAN is going to go in the slides also in terms of PDF we share after the meeting. So you can go through all this. Now, let me get my laser pointer, if I can locate it. There it is. All right, I prefer a pen. Okay, so when you start looking at, of course, job and research opportunities, you start looking at the domain or the car itself first. So if you look at the car itself first, what's happening to things? For example, if your job was in lead acid batteries, definitely you will see a negative impact. Engine parts, you are going to see negative impact, transmitter subsystems. So these are the few things which you're going to see a negative impact. At the same time, if you're into converters, lithium-ion batteries, ECUs, you're going to see a positive impact, or these are the new opportunities coming up. And in this report, they talk about this in a lot of detail, and we can go over it in your time. So high level, if you summarize where the new jobs are coming up because of electric vehicle, first is definitely in core science. And core science, of course, there's a lot of research which is happening worldwide, but in India itself regarding batteries. So we are talking about making battery from herbal or making battery from kidney beans or things like that. So there's a lot of research going on battery thermal design, on the BMS system, those kind of things. So on core science, on the materials, there's a lot of research going on, and particularly because which chemical goes into it determines the efficiency and also the thermal design of it. If I have a battery, the pack around it, how much energy it can transmit, how good the cooling is. So it's not only about chemistry, it's chemistry, physics, and it goes on to your mechanical engineering, because this is a machine which is going to be on the road. So your chemical engineering, your physics, your mechanical engineering, your thermal engineering, all that plays into the role here. So, and of course, it's a completely digital vehicle. So we are looking at things like IoT and anything digital here. Design and development for new modular vehicles. The conventional powertrain, taking whatever was there and converting it to our uses will not work, because the electric vehicle is going to be digital, it's going to be autonomous, and it's going to be connected. So it has a different purpose to play. So you need to design in such a way so that it's modular, and it's going to be it's going to serve the needs which are going to come in future. Transportation system modeling, I'll talk a little bit more about it, and for industry 4.0, which is obvious. Now let's look at some very specific opportunities. One which we don't talk about a lot is media. So there's a lot of myths about electric vehicles which needs to be busted. So we need to do lots of education. And for example, the kind of thing which we are doing in this seminar, that needs to be done. Similarly, marketing EV as a lifestyle thing, because we talked about the pickup. Revolt has come. They opened their sale around 10:30, I believe, in the night. And before 11:30, 1 hour, everything on it was sold. And now they are taking orders for the next lot. So it's a lifestyle vehicle. And it has to be also sold that way, because we know there's a premium on top of it. So Aether, Revolt, they need to be, they are selling it as a lifestyle vehicle. And there's a role of marketing. Real estate, when you go for your charge, when you park the vehicle, at the same time, you can charge it also. So I know a couple of startups who are working on, for example, attached to FASTag, so that through the FASTag, you access the lot, and through the same FASTag, you can pay for the charging. A lot of needs around physical survey and digitization of information. For example, the power line networks, you need to know where the high tension lines are so that you can make the chargers close to it, and that will have less cost on the cabling needed. Similarly, if you have a hotel, you can have an EV wallet service. So how to design that? So there are a lot of opportunity around real estate, regarding policy making, financial modeling, and of course, consulting. So for example, in Bangalore, the Bangalore Apartment Federation, they are looking at it and they are saying, can we have some policies which will help the association, the apartment complex, come up with their EV adoption? So there's a lot of need around that. And if you are good at it, or even if you know basics and you become a consultant, there's a good opportunity to go and help out people. The other part, we added a few slides because there were some questions around analytics last time, and everybody is interested in data. So the other 3-4 slides I quickly cover from analytics point of view. Now, hold on, I'm just saying I hear some noise. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what is so different? Because we already have vehicles. Why is electric vehicle different? First reason is that it's digital by design. It's supposed to gather data. It's supposed to be connected. The vehicles are supposed to be connected internally, and their vehicle are supposed to be connected to a network. So, and later they are supposed to support automated mobility. And batteries, unlike petrol and diesel, they are charged from a shared resource. So if you are charging, you are not just, I mean, the petrol is not available just for you, and you are feeling it. When you're charging your vehicle, it's putting pressure on the grid, which has to serve the houses, the industries, and everything. And then you cannot store electricity unless you have a battery. So it's not something which you put in a can and then you store and you can use it later. So the way you consume or you power the vehicle also is different. If you look at any particular problem from decision-making point of view, it's a very complex problem. And just look at one example. If you're looking at charger location, you have given 100 chargers and you need to decide where to put them. If you look at EV owners' point of view, then they would say you do it in such a way so that maximum population is covered. But if you look at government's point of view, they would like to cover by area. So they would say every 10 kilometers put one. EV owners will say wherever there's a lot of population, you put there. Now, if you look at operator's point of view, operator will say wherever I will get the maximum revenue, you let me put there. However, Discom will say wherever I can get or whatever I get maximum uses, the amount of kilowatt hour should be maximum. So it becomes a tough multi-objective problem looking at all these, and you need to optimize it because you can't ignore any of them. They all are active stakeholders in the process. And then, as Vignesh pointed out, unlike ICE vehicle, ecosystem is stable, and it's going to evolve over these years. So that means there's a lot of scope for new innovations in technology policies and our mindsets. So it's not just about the science as such, and in terms of the chemistry and the physics of it, it's also a lot of research around behavioral science. What type of incentives should we put? What type of propaganda should be there so that people understand and then they adopt EV? So there's a lot of behavioral science also which goes behind the adoption if we need to speed it up. There are 7 aspects of it: government, vehicles, batteries, charger, operators, discoms, financing, roaming. I have only 2 minutes, so let me just quickly read it out and I will then provide it for later. Now, if you look at analytics, question is what data you will be looking at. So you will be looking at battery state of charge, battery performance, state of health, who is owning it, how are we using it, where are we charging it, what kind of details are we charging, and then when we are charging, what kind of diagnostic data, maintenance data we are preparing, what kind of demographics is there. Are people buying 2-wheeler or people will buy 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers? Are they going to buy Tesla and Nexon? So demographics play a good role. The real estate data, is the parking available, is the rent available? So that is important. Your electricity network, your electricity demand, policy. So these are all lots of data which were not earlier considered. When you look at ICE vehicle, all these needs to be considered when you are going to do analytics. And this also means that you will be only studying a piece of the problem. So if you can get data around a particular piece, then you can get started. And here is a link which we also looked into. It's one of my assignment I gave, that if you look at this link, you will find lots of data there. The rest of it, I'm not going to cover in interest of time because I want to leave time for discussion. So what kind of analytics in battery charging, supply demand, electricity supply, charging operators, fleet operators, EV financing, urban planning. Just quickly, I'll show you this link. And of course, we'll provide this also offline. So if you go to this link, there are lots of good papers available here. So if you just go to that link, there are tons of good papers available, and you can go start reading from there. There are some pretty good books also available here. You can get started reading on these. And as we promised, after looking at all this, and in last 3-4 years of whatever we have learned about EV, these are some resources which I think are very, very relevant and very, very useful for those in India. So these are all the links you may like to look at. And I have posted everything into the LinkedIn post. So if you just go to that link I gave, and I will put that link into the chat itself. So if you just go to that link, everyone post it. If you go to this link, then all those links are posted here. If you follow these guys, they have lots of information. So if you want to get real-time updates, what's happening on the policies, they do it very often. If you look at Plugin India, very, very good videos around all the resources. You want to learn about it, these reports are very useful. And if you want to participate in certain forums focused on OEM or smart utilities or energy storage sustainability, then these are the good forums to attend. That is it. Actually, I will stop talking and stop sharing. We are exactly at 7 p.m. Now let's take questions. Okay. So, Avi, all yours.
There are a couple of
Can
questions.
we allow people to go ahead and unmute
please.
themselves? Okay, so I think at this point both Vignesh and I are available. Please feel free and go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll be here to answer any questions.
So there is one question, Dr. Ravind, in terms of, do you think India's power sector is prepared for the surge in EVs? So the increase,
So I think we covered it last week also. So there are two factors of it, and if you look at the slides, the last week presentation, so the generation piece and the distribution piece. From generation point of view, I don't think that's a concern, and that's where we all agree. From distribution point of view, from the last mile discoms, no, we are not prepared, but we have time. As the penetration increases, we have to start working on it. So we have to start working on it now, but we can be prepared for it if we do our due diligence right. Okay, I see a question from Praveen saying, sir, what and where could be the training opportunity for BTech undergraduate? Look at those links. The links I have shared, one of those are NPTEL from IIT Madras, and I think it's a couple of months course. It goes into very, very details, and it's done by Professor Junjunwala, who is of course he's also from EC, electrical. So very good coverage. So I think you should definitely try doing that course. Is there any concept of the water that would be soon emerging and cheap in technology? I think probably the question is mistyped, but go ahead, feel free to unmute and talk, because it's no fun, just talking to ourselves. It's very boring. So I'm not going to take any more questions in text. You have a question, go ahead and ask by unmuting yourself.
Hi, Dr. Arvind, Gautam here. The question is, the EVs, those are sold right now, let's say four-wheelers in the Indian market. Most of them, the OEMs give 8 years warranty, or let's say 150,000 kilometers warranty. So really speaking, what happens to the battery after this 8 years? Means, will there be again a big cost involved for the buyer?
Yeah, I can take that a bit, Arvind. Yes, so in fact, 8 years, I think only Tata is giving. And I think that's their assessment of utilization. My sense is that, after 8 years, usually after 4 to 5 years, you would replace the battery, because the battery also has a degradation based on utilization, right? So after 4 to 5 years, you would replace the battery, and there is a repowering equivalent at that point, which you will take into consideration the current costs at that point. So there will be a cost involved again, which is where the financing mechanisms of battery is very important to be put in place, right? So it's not even 8 years. I think in 4 to 5 years you will have to look at replacing or repowering the vehicle.
Yeah, so the corollary to that, if the initial cost itself is 30% premium than the IC vehicle, and after 4 to 5 years, probably now we just saw in today's session that 35 to 40% is the cost of battery in the EV. So does it make really a viable option to switch to EV at current stage?
It still does, because of two reasons. One is the level of usage. Secondly, if you think about all the changes that have happened with storage-based technologies, even in your cell phone, you see that batteries have become much more reliable and sturdy, right? So in that context, when you look at replacing, you are going to look at the forward use case of the battery from that point on, right? You're not factoring in that use case into your current cost. Right now, you'll say, let me assume that in 4 to 5 years, I'm going to change. And does it make sense for me to buy now? And the answer is, in 4 to 5 years, if you are one of the heavy users, it absolutely makes sense. As the battery costs keep falling down, that 4 to 5 years can become, the economic viability of that becomes much better, right? So yeah, what is also will be interesting is the electricity pricing, right? Which we believe with more and more renewable coming in, the average cost of electricity on the grid is going to go down. And this is what you're seeing in many other advanced electricity markets as well. So therefore, when you are evaluating the replacement of the battery in 4 years or 5 years time, you are looking forward. If I put a new battery, I can use the vehicle for another 4 years, and at that time, what is the cost of me operating the vehicle? I'm sure it'll be way more, at least the models I have seen, with a replacement as well, it'll be way more beneficial to run EVs at that point.
Yeah, Dr. Arvind, good evening. This is Rishi once again. I'm associated. Yeah, I'm associated with a EV benchmark and testing facility company, and I have a very simple question that I am connected with so many universities also for data analytics, particularly for the vehicle engineering. And unfortunately, I have not found anything because I want to generate this ecosystem in my company also. And we want to get into this place. And I think you are the right person to guide me on this topic. Thank you.
So Rishi, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to guide. Unfortunately, the resources which I am aware about, I have shared those already. But if you have a particular problem in mind, which you are looking at a particular data source, then let's connect offline. The link I have given you, that's where my LinkedIn link is also there. And then let's connect offline and see if I can help you get access to that particular data set, if possible.
Correct, because I have connected with the Georgia Institute of Technology also, but unfortunately they do not have anything for the EV ecosystem vehicle analytics type of things. So I think we need something which has to be newly developed for this type of ecosystem, if I'm not wrong.
Yes and no, because what happens is, for example, if the KPMG, for example, what they did is the KPMG group in Delhi, and I was talking to them a few months ago, and they just looked at, they were looking at the penetration, or they were trying to project the penetration of electric EV chargers in an area. And they came up with an interesting hypothesis that they looked at one of the mature cities. For example, they looked at San Francisco or one of the mature cities in California. And then they said, okay, let's take the demographics of this city and let's see what kind of EV charging penetration has happened. And then they looked at Toronto, and whatever similarities they found in demographics, based on that, they made a projection that these could be the good areas in Toronto where you would like to put chargers. So I guess we will have to be more creative because if we limit ourselves like what data we have, it will be tough. So we need to be more creative in terms of defining the problem and seeing, how based on the current data we have, we can gather things. But yes, I fully agree that lots of data is not available, but can be made available with certain effort. Of course, we need to see that, what specifically you're looking at. Let's connect offline for that, yeah?
Yeah, sure, Doctor.
Okay, any other questions, or I think we should call it a day then?
Ritika here.
Am
I audible?
Yes, Ritika, yeah.
I just want to know that, can you highlight few more research area around charging stations, specifically in computer science field?
It's an open question. So if you say computer science, I would say if you have the analytics part of the slides which I was showing, let me share that share this after this meeting, because that would have answered your question. So there's a lot of research, simple things like the policies we are coming up. Can we do reinforced learning and figured out we want to change people's behavior? So what kind of tariff should be there? Now that's a good reinforcement learning problem. And if you have decent data, then basically you can do experimentation around that. And there are, I know a couple of colleagues from Toronto or from Canada who are doing research in that direction. So let me share the slides on analytics, and I believe that should answer your question. So in that context. Shambhavi, I saw you went on unmute. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Punam, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, as you mentioned, the behavior studies in transportation, in EV, that what is your thought on how the urban density is affecting on the EV adoption? There is a difference between EV adoption in rural area and urban area. So what is your thought on this?
I mean, so basically, as you pointed out, the needs are different. So probably I will be giving a. So Vignesh, you want to add something?
Always, it's not just EV, right? Transportation needs are largely also dependent on how zoning happens in cities, right? What is the largest place where people go to on a daily basis? So basically the central business district, or where there's maximum employment opportunities, and where they live, right? That determines a lot of the transportation. So obviously, in more dense areas, that complexity is much higher, because especially if you have mixed use, zoning, etc. Right? So I don't think it is a specific thing to EV. What changes with EV is the fact that you have to also now manage not only the traffic flow, but the energy flows on the same copper wire that you had before, right? And that is the exciting part. But I don't think there is a direct correlation only one-on-one, right? There are many factors that influence it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Rajneesh, you want to go next?
Yes, please. Good evening. So
Rajneesh, your voice is breaking. I can barely hear you.
Japanese company, and okay, traveling. I can't do much to improve the voice, but let me just try. I wanted to check that the EV transition is still a long way, and from the technology point of view, from eco-structure development point of view, I just wanted to, have your opinion. Is there a scope for hybrid as an interim step in between, especially in Indian market? Because globally, hybrid is a success concept, and especially in Japan and the other developed countries like US. But in India, I'm not sure, because we are just talking plain straight away switch over to EV. And in between, is there some kind of scope is there for the hybrid? And most of the Japanese companies, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of, they're not counting much success in EV. They have parked their resources for hybrid or alternate fuel cell rather than EV. Most of the European and the Chinese companies are talking about EV because of the, I don't know for what reasons, but Japanese or the most successful car makers are still not invested for this concept. So from that point of view, my question was, is hybrid a possibility in India also?
Rajni says, Vignesh, I'll attempt to answer that. Very valid point. In fact, we didn't want to bring in hybrids as a large discussion topic here because there are many other geopolitical angles to it.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Yeah. But you're absolutely right in that Japanese are completely not bullish about EVs to the extent that other automakers are. Right? And to a large extent, they have also not been investing in EVs as long as other automakers have been, right? So perhaps there is an angle towards where they see their sort of competitive value, right? Because any of this technology at the reliance and at the sort of ruggedness or the quality of a Japanese product will need at least 8 to 10 years of investment from their side, right? Which I don't believe most of them have done.
Yeah.
The other bet is that somehow hybrids from a sort of a efficiency standpoint will beat and will be a right midway point between electric and the fossil fuel today. I think one staple data point is the Toyota vehicle family in even the US, right? And you see that most people have gone away from it, right? Because there is a combination of this whole hybrid and the cost and the delivery mechanism that takes that takes a much longer cost range is the sense, right? But that said, I believe technology adoption is also a function of how much people are willing to plonk into what it takes for accelerating the adoption of those technologies, right? And in that sense, electric has taken a larger bet because frankly, I think a lot of utilities around the world see this as a way to increase their sales, right? So they are willing to put, and they are all balance sheet sitting with large amounts of cash and assets in general, right? So I think that has been the larger rider, right? And the geopolitical angle around oil is certainly there, but I don't want to get into it. It becomes a very it's a discussion I am not qualified to speak about, right? In any measure. But except for the Japanese, the Chinese, American, to a large extent, and European have been driving electric, and therefore, there is a higher chance, let's put it this way, that you will see more pure electric than hybrids in the roads.
Right. Fine. Thank you. I think I got some clarity about this.
Okay. Anybody else? I think we've actually gone well past time. Again, very, very engaging set of people. Really thank you for this opportunity to both IIM Ahmedabad and the Center for Transportation and all the people who attended the session. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Vignesh. Thank you, Dr. Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a blessed day, and we will call it a day then.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.